So before we start, trigger warning for everyone. Given the subject matter, there will be a lot of talk about suicide, and there will be mention of rape. So, if that is not something you want to hear about, just skip this episode. Alright? Alright. In my Vivian video, which was last week from this video, I made an offhand comment about the difficulties in making a self-contained one-season series. But who knew I was about to review the patron saint of that. This series has had a very public and very troubled work cycle, with them working on the episode about to premiere hours before it was about to go out. That is not to say that their work isn't appreciated. The series looks very pretty and definitely a key part in getting people hooked on this series. But you know, maybe you could have just delayed it so you didn't have to do so much crunch time. Additionally, you could have spent more time working on that story and figuring out how to, write an actual ending. As this series is the equivalent of a skateboarder doing a 6 set of tricks, then saying, "Check this out," before smashing their nuts on the rail and eating a face full of cement. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Wonder Egg Priority is about a group of girls who all have a similar background, of a person they know committing suicide. Of course, all 4 want to bring that person back, and are now given the opportunity to do that, as 2 mannequin dudes tell them to buy a Wonder Egg, which when cracked summons a girl that previously committed suicide and warps them into an else world, where they must save them from the on-the-nose embodiment of their trauma. Each girl you save brings you closer to turning that statue of the person you want closer to becoming a real girl again. As for the girls, you have I, a girl with heterochromia, who is bullied because of it. But she's trying to save her friend who committed suicide because she was raped by her teacher. But she doesn't know that yet. And boy is it chilling, that said teacher is currently dating her mother. But she's the kindest of the group and the fan favorite. Second to show up is Neru, who's trying to save her sister. But she's super reserved and logical and super rich and it's hard to relate to. But don't worry, that backstory doesn't matter, as we will cover later. Rika is a former idol trying to save one of her superfans that she accidentally led to suicide. She's also a bit callous and rude, but in my opinion, she has the best backstory and has a great death as shown in her solo episode. That goes with her troubled relationship with her parents. Her mother's essentially a socialite slash hooker who doesn't even know who the father of her daughter is. And Rika only has one memory of her father to go off of, meaning you can understand some of the issues she would have growing up, and the suicide didn't help her ability to make connections. Lastly, there's Momo, a princely kind of girl who wants to be more feminine. But a girl confessed to her, and she declined, and of course, she later committed suicide. She's fine, but I feel she had the least amount of character growth. But hey, at least her backstory sticks around. But here are the problems that the series runs into. First up is just being disrespectful of her suicide. The line that the only reason all the eggs and the people who buy these eggs are girls are because girls are different and so emotional and are more likely to commit suicide out of passion is very problematic. Hopefully I don't need to explain why that is completely wrong and sexist, but you could have just tied it in with the high concept you bring in. That concept being that the 2 mannequins were formerly scientists who made an AI girl who killed one of the scientist's wife and daughter, doing it out of jealousy, as she was no longer the most important girl for the 2. The 2 locked her away, but she escapes into another world and is now going around causing the other girls to commit suicide. But that is his own can of worms, as you're taking away from the real reason the series has shown for people committing suicide, and that they only did it because the AI told them to. Additionally, the story is rather inconsistent at times. Very early on in the series, they established that while in the other world, you are immortal, but any damage that you take will be reflected in the real world, meaning that you get stabbed in the other world, you have a stab wound in the real world. But this is basically forgotten as the girls start eating entire loads of punishment. Plus, the familiars they get are mainly there just to get killed off to get some cheap heat for the villains. While they are an important part of Rika's plot, but by the end they're just kind of forgotten as I saves her, but we get no follow-up, and are we going to do anything about that? But moving on, there's also the time where Rika gets turned to stone for reasons. Don't worry about it, I guess it was just there to add tension. Also, to circle back to that bad ending, the whole backstory for Neru? Doesn't matter, now she's just an AI clone of her sister, who's now battling the other AI girl made by the scientist and her flock of AI girls that she made. But hey, at least we got an entire episode and spent half of the quote-unquote finale recapping the series. I can understand wanting to go big on your first foray, as this is a lot of the production cast's first go at this. But there's a such thing as overriding, and the reveal of the super evil AI probably needed to have been axed, and you should have just gone for a simpler storyline. You could have just focused on the character growth of the girls. You even teased a bit as Rika made a good point that Ai's journey to save her only friend has resulted in her making 3 new friends. So is it worth risking her life? This is a pretty good point, assuming you stick with the whole damage is reflected in the real world angle. Like, maybe you can keep the whole parallel world bit where Ai hatches herself, which leads to her learning the truth about her friend's death. Maybe do a message about the grieving process and that there are no do-overs. So we need to keep an eye out and help those at risk, and not be afraid to call out those who abuse their position to prey on girls. But that's just my opinion, and I have no experience writing TV shows, so what do I know? It's a shame, as the core idea is solid. I just think that the time constraints probably did not help, as they probably needed to decide on keeping a consistent style and animation, or double checking the direction and the plot the series was going for. I do hope the production team doesn't let the reaction to this series bring them down, as they made a solid attempt. It was just that they weren't given the time to work it into its peak form. I know some will say, don't worry, the second season will totally fix it, but I think it's too far gone to salvage a good series out of this. I will say that there are some good parts. Episodes 7 and 9 are great. Episode 10 at least has some good intentions with the inclusion of a trans character, but the whole only girls things kinda messes with that. Maybe just watch the episode that features Rika's story arc and walk away, as that's the only part that I can say is good all the way through.